what is self-control? Now, aside from being one of my favorite Frank Ocean songs, it also happens to be a fruit of the Spirit. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with that term, it's essentially a term coined by Apostle Paul in his epistle, essentially his letter, okay? His letter to the Galatians. Now, in that letter, he talks about 9 attributes, 9 characteristics, 9 virtues that are manifested in a person's life if they choose to live guided by the Holy Spirit. Now, one of those virtues is self-control. But let's put that aside for a second. Biblical basis aside, musical references aside, what is self-control? Now, personally, for me, I recognize self-control as the virtue of regulation. But while researching for this video, I did stumble across this 2013 paper by Professor Adele Diamond entitled Executive Functions. Now, I'm going to put that paper down in the description below if you want to just read it, take a quick read, whatever you want, right? If you read her paper, you're going to find that it talks about 4 functions that allow for a person to become a better planner, more focused, and more determined in the face of challenges and impulses. But the part that I do want to emphasize is the one that defines the central focus of this video. Now, according to her paper, self-control is the aspect of inhibitory control that involves control over one's behavior and control over one's emotions in the service of controlling one's behavior. Self-control is about resisting temptations and not acting impulsively. The temptation resisted might be to indulge in pleasures when one should not. An example of this is to indulge in a romantic fling if you are married, or to eat sweets if you're trying to lose weight. Another example is to overindulge or to stray from the straight and narrow, like cheating or stealing. Or the temptation might be to impulsively react. An example of that would be reflexively striking back at someone who has hurt your feelings, or to do or take what you want without regard for social norms, like butting in line or grabbing another child's toy. Now, I'm not going to read from her whole paper, but if you want to, again, I have it in the link. I have it linked in the description below. But she mentions in her paper this specific term that I believe is crucial whenever there's a discussion about self-control. And that term is delayed gratification. Now let's break that term down for a second. What is delayed gratification? Obviously, it's delayed, okay? So it's putting something off. But then what are we putting off? Gratification. What is gratification? Gratification is the feeling of pleasure, satisfaction, or fulfillment that comes from achieving a goal, satisfying a desire, or acquiring something you want. Now, whenever the term delayed gratification is mentioned, it's always in tandem with another term, and that is instant gratification. Now, the difference between the two can be explained very easily, okay? Think of it like this. You're put in a room and you're given a treat, like a marshmallow, for example. And then you're given 2 choices, okay? The first choice is you can eat that marshmallow now. That's option A, okay? The second choice, option B, you can save that marshmallow, wait 15 minutes, and then you'll be given another treat in addition to that first treat. Okay, like another marshmallow, okay? So you wait 15 minutes, you get another marshmallow. Or you can eat the marshmallow now, but you won't get anything, okay? If you choose option A, to eat the marshmallow now, that's instant gratification. You're choosing the option with a more immediate effect, as opposed to choosing option B, which will give you twice the same reward for the price of 15 minutes of waiting, okay? Now, obviously, if you choose option B, That's delayed gratification. You see the difference? Now, that example that I just brought up right now wasn't random, okay? The whole marshmallow hypothetical, that's a real experiment that was conducted in 1970. The Stanford Marshmallow Experiment, okay? It was conducted by psychologist Walter Mischel at Stanford University in 1970, okay? That experiment was conducted in the same way that I proposed to you just now with the whole marshmallow thing, with the two choices. But the participants were children. Now, the reason I bring that up is because later on, as Mischel conducted follow-up studies, he found that there was something special about the children that had the capacity to delay gratification. In 1988, okay, this is 18 years, 18 years after the first study, after the first experiment. He did a follow-up study, and he discovered that there was a correlation between delayed gratification and competence within adolescents, okay? Children who were able to wait longer at ages 4 or 5 became adolescents whose parents rated them as more academically and socially competent, verbally fluent, rational, attentive, planful, and able to deal well with stress and frustration. Now, there's a journal article all about the results of that follow-up study, that first follow-up study in 1988. But the thing is, I'm not really certain if it's entirely accessible or free, okay? So, just looking at it from an outside perspective, I thought about it, and I was like, well, that's kind of suspicious, right? Because, I mean, what parent wouldn't say that their child is competent, okay? Like, imagine you are a parent and a researcher comes to your house and interviews you about your child, and then you tell them your kid is incompetent? That they're stupid? Of course not, okay? Because then what? Like almost 40 years later, that data is still going to be around in some journal article on the internet, and people will read that, and then they're going to read that you said your kid was stupid, okay? Like, the point I'm trying to make is that I'm not going to buy it if it's just that, okay? If that's all there is. Sorry, Walter Mischel. Except it's not. That's not where the story ends, okay? The good thing is there's a more concrete form of evidence which further reinforces the correlation between delayed gratification and success. In 1990, okay, this is 2 years after the first follow-up study. This is the second one. The second follow-up study showed that there is also a correlation with the ability to delay gratification and higher SAT scores. Now, there's an argument to be made that, the idea of people in your life, especially your parents, viewing you as this smart and competent person would most likely further motivate you into maintaining that image of you being this smart and competent person. So it's essentially like this feedback loop of you becoming this accomplished individual. But at the very, very least, okay, we can establish that there is a correlation between delayed gratification and success. And personally, in my own personal experience, it's redundant. But the point I'm trying to make is I myself am a believer of that fact, okay? Looking back at my own experience, my own life, as an individual, I would say that it's a given fact that living a life full of delayed gratification is going to propel your success way further than someone who seeks instant gratification all the time. It's like comparing an athlete, right? Training each and every day to be good at their sport and win trophies and at these competitions and these events versus someone who bed rots, doom scrolls, and eats processed food all the time. If you're still watching the video and you haven't skipped through it, you'll know that I was directly looking at the camera just now. Okay? That's for all the people who skipped through the video. I'm looking at my channel analytics, okay? You watch out. Okay, let's set that aside for a bit. Don't get me wrong, okay? What I'm doing right now isn't judgment. I'm not judging you for bed rotting, for doom scrolling, for doing all those things, for eating all that processed food, because I do all of that too. I'm not going to pretend to be this perfect messiah, savior. I know everything. I know everything. No. I'm human. Same as you. I bed rot. I doom scroll. I eat processed food. I'm as addicted to instant gratification as anybody else is. But that's also why I can testify that delayed gratification works wonders. It works wonders, especially for people who live for instant everything. Okay? Real talk. Aside from bed rotting, doom scrolling, and, heavy consumption of processed foods, I used to have a lot of other personal struggles when it comes to self-control, especially because of certain vices. Okay? And I look back and I think about a lot of the stuff that I used to entertain in my life. Like, for example, nail biting. I used to bite my nails a lot. My nails would look hideous. Now I don't. Staying up late. Sorry, I had to burp. Actually, you know what? Pause. Guys, water break. Let's have a water break. Water break. Got my water right here. Let me take a sip, and then we'll get back, okay? Okay. Rejuvenated. I'm ready to go. Hold on. Where were we? Right. I used to have a lot of stuff in my life that I would entertain, that I don't entertain anymore. Like, for example, nail biting. I used to bite my nails and my nails would look hideous. They would look disgusting. I didn't groom myself properly. Nail biting. Staying up late. Now, I'm sure someone out there, especially, okay, I'm not going to name names, but there's definitely someone there who's watching this video right now who can attest that I still stay up late. But I'm trying to fix that, okay? So maybe we don't include that in the list. Nail biting. Staying up late. Nah. Okay. Procrastination. I used to procrastinate way too much. And that was affecting my performance. Academically, socially, physically. It was killing me, okay? Procrastination. Hair pulling. Now, when I would get stressed, sometimes I would just start pulling my hairs. I don't do that anymore. Obviously, you can tell by my luscious locks, right? Negative thinking. I used to really be a negative thinker, to the point that not only do I overthink, but I also overthink to the extent that it destroys me. My mind wasn't a safe place. You couldn't keep me by myself with just my thoughts, because it would drive me nuts, dude. I would go insane. Anger issues. I used to have insane anger issues. I used to be such an angry person. If you got me riled up, you got me mad, you got me angry, whole day is ruined. Maybe the whole week. And I would just violent rage, okay? Like, imagine I would punch stuff. I used to punch my monitor. I used to punch chairs for some reason. I don't know. It's I look back on that and I think, whoa, that's insane, dude. Self-control. Self-loathing. That's another thing that I used to really, entertain. And, I know that's technically part of negative thinking, but I did want to differentiate it, because I think that also happened to be a big part of my struggles. Lust. Now, lust was something that I struggled with for a majority of my adolescence. So I do have a lot to say about it, but I'll save that for a future video. So if you guys want to, watch a video about lust, suggest. Suicidal ideation. Again, still part of negative thinking, I would say, but I feel as though I have to mention it because, again, it was part of my struggles that I do think self-control really helped a lot in stopping those things, right? All those personal struggles of mine, those self-sabotaging tendencies, they were caused partially or in part by a lack of self-control, self-discipline, self-regulation. Call it whatever you want, but I think that lack of control and that emptiness inside of me, it stemmed from a lack of self-reflection. Okay? And the reason that I say that is because I look back on all those struggles and I realized that the common denominator was always that I found that I was struggling with all those things because I didn't have a sense of self-evaluation. Okay? I wasn't present in my own mind. I didn't bother to be present in the moment, so there was no clarity in my thought process. Okay? There was no conscious voice in my head pushing against these behaviors, fighting against these thoughts. And I think that ties really well into quite possibly one of the very first Bible verses that I ever memorized. Okay? And I'll read it out. This is NIV. Okay? 1 Peter 5 verse 8. Be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. Now, that specific verse helped me to realize that one of the biggest factors that determined whether or not I would continue to perpetuate these self-sabotaging cycles in my life was whether or not I kept my guard up. Okay? The mere fact that I could retain a sober mind, especially in times of weakness, that was the key factor in cutting out these habits and these strongholds from my life. And funnily enough, that perfectly segues into our actionable or our practical steps. Okay? Keep your guard up. Number 1, keep your guard up. Have a sense of discernment. Now, when I say keep your guard up, I'm not telling you to be paranoid. Keep my guard up. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna fail. No, it just means to be aware, okay? Be aware of your current mental state, whether or not you're susceptible or you're vulnerable to certain impulses or temptations, whether or not you're confident that you can restrain yourself, you can control yourself in the face of certain triggers, okay? Be alert and of sober mind. Think of it like this, okay? You need to install an alarm in your brain, and that alarm is going to sound off, wee-woo, wee-woo, whenever you're in an environment or you yourself are in a state that makes you vulnerable to being triggered to do certain behaviors or participate in bad habits. Okay? If you know that you are vulnerable to being triggered, then what? Okay? Triggered by what? That brings me to my next point. Understand yourself. Have some sense of awareness. Work towards a point where you have this fundamental understanding of yourself. Okay? And that is going to work in your favor when you're trying to cultivate a better sense of self-control, because that means you develop a better understanding of two things about yourself, okay? The first is that you develop a better understanding of your endpoint, okay? What do you mean by endpoint, Josh? That means you understand your goals, you understand your desires, your dreams, and what you want to accomplish in life, okay? That is your endpoint. Now, the second is that you develop a better understanding of your obstacles. That means your personal struggles, your triggers, your vices, your addictions. Those are your obstacles. And once you understand where you want to be in life and what things are preventing you from getting there, then things are going to be much easier, okay? You're going to have a simpler journey navigating your way around those obstacles, okay? Now, this second step, understanding yourself, requires a few other, practical steps underneath it, okay? If you want to better understand yourself, you're going to have to do journaling or meditation or just any activity that will allow you to constantly reflect on the day or just evaluate yourself, okay? I don't know if the mic can pick that up. Whatever. Third practical step, get back up. Develop this awareness of grace, the concept of grace. Now, I said this before in the previous video, but I think it's especially true for our topic today. Whenever you experience a lapse or a relapse in certain behaviors, you have to get yourself out of this mindset of guilt and self-hatred, because that's not going to get you anywhere, okay? As a matter of fact, I think, part of constantly feeling bad about yourself is, ironically, a coping mechanism to feel good about yourself. What does that mean? You might be wondering. It's like you're feeling bad about yourself just so you can say, "Oh, I feel bad about this. That means I'm a good person." Except, not only are you sabotaging yourself, you're also not doing anything about it, aside from scratching your back, okay? I believe that one of the greatest tragedies in life is that there will never be anybody in our lifetime who will get to know us better than we know ourselves. Think about that for a second. And I'll say it again. I believe that one of the greatest tragedies in life is that there will never be anybody in our lifetime who will get to know us better than we know ourselves. Are you done thinking about it? You done meditating on that? Good. Now, let that motivate you. No one in this entire planet will ever know you better than you know yourself. Which means nobody in this entire planet is more equipped to save you from your struggles other than yourself. You have the power. Now that's looking at things from a very secular perspective. So let me appeal to a more spiritual audience. If we look at things from a spiritual standpoint, there's also truth in what I just said right now. Romans 8 verse 11 says, "And if the spirit of him who raised Jesus from the dead is living in you, he who raised Christ from the dead will also give life to your mortal bodies because of his spirit who lives in you." Now, what does that verse mean? It means that the same spirit that resurrected Jesus from the dead dwells in you. In you. That means the power of his spirit lives in you. You have the power to control yourself. The virtue of temperance, the ability of self-control, self-denial. Matthew chapter 16, verse 24 says, "Then Jesus said to his disciples, 'Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and then take up their cross and follow me.'" Now, what does that mean? Jesus said if you want to be his disciple, you have to deny yourself and take up your cross? I don't know if you can see that. What's the context of that? We're going to have to perform a little something called exegesis. Now, exegesis is the critical and objective analysis of a text in order to understand what its original author actually intended to communicate. Now, in the context of interpreting biblical messages, what that essentially means is obtaining information and context from other chapters and other books in the Bible in order to properly interpret and explain the context of certain biblical messages. So let's go back to Matthew chapter 16, verse 24. In the context of denying yourself, I believe that the biblical message that comes to mind the most is the internal conflict of spirit and flesh. And I think that works really well with the concept of self-control also. In St. Paul's letter to the Galatians, specifically chapter 5, verses 13 to 26, he mentions this specific conflict. And now I'm only going to read verses 16 to 17, but I'll put the whole thing up on screen for you to read if, you're interested. Galatians 5, verse 16 to 17. "So I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh. For the flesh desires what is contrary to the Spirit, and the Spirit what is contrary to the flesh." Now, in many ways, I think that verse perfectly sums up the essence of self-control. Now, it's important to note that you don't have to cut out all of that from your life. I know there are some things in that specific excerpt that Paul mentioned that I'm sure not even the most secular of us do. But the point I'm trying to say is practice control. Okay? Practice moderation. Learn to live in a manner that embodies regulation for the sake of preservation. If you embody discipline, you'll be winning in life. Mic drop. 1 Corinthians 10, verse 23 says, "I have the right to do anything you say, but not everything is beneficial. I have the right to do anything, but not everything is constructive." Now, there's another version of that I memorized, so I'll read that too. I'll just put the two versions on screen. 1 Corinthians 10, verse 23. "Everything is permissible, but not everything is beneficial. Everything is permissible, but not everything builds up." Moderation. Not all things in life are going to benefit you. And you have to understand that even the best things in life in excess is going to destroy you. Moderation, temperance, self-control. Practice that in all things, because that is going to carry you so much in life. Not a lot of people put value on that, put emphasis on that. So allow me to put emphasis on that. Practice self-control. With all that being said, that brings us to the conclusion of today's episode. I'm sorry if, it got a bit too biblical at the end. I know some people don't really like it when that happens, but I feel as though it is necessary to engage you all in scripture talk. Now, before we conclude completely, I would just like to say a couple things, okay? I feel obligated to tell you, as a creator, that if you enjoy my content, please support me by liking, subscribing, watching the full length of the video. I'm looking at you people who skip to the end. And most importantly of all, commenting. Okay? Now, as a fellow consumer of content, I know that reminders like these can be pretty annoying to hear, but I have to emphasize that it really does mean a lot to me when I receive feedback, right? Whether that feedback is positive or negative, it doesn't make any difference to me, okay? As a matter of fact, I would even go as far as to say that I appreciate negative feedback more, because that means that people actually care enough about my content that they feel the need to criticize me. Now, of course, the caveat is that the feedback I receive has to have some semblance of constructive criticism, because then otherwise it's just hate. You're just hating on me for no reason, and it doesn't build me up, okay? Now, lastly, if you're interested in videos like these on this channel, please look out for any community announcements. Once I figure out how to work out the community tab, please look out for community announcements, because I might start holding polls soon for future topics. After this video, I believe I have 2 more topics in line, so we still have some stuff in the queue. Jealousy, I think, and then peace, okay? I hold polls on my Instagram account, but I don't think I'm going to do that anymore. I'm going to hold polls this time on this channel specifically. So stay tuned and stay alert for that. You know, look out for that. Watch out for that, guys, because I'm going to start holding polls here. And I want you guys to be able to vote, because democracy is a good thing. It's important. Anywho, thanks for watching or for listening. If you have this in the background, it means a lot if you just listen, because time is one of the most important things a person has, and for you to spend even a fraction of that watching this video or just engaging in my content in general, that means the world to me. Remember, take everything with a grain of salt, do your own research, have fun, enjoy life, be proud of who you are. Always remember that you are loved and cherished. Goodbye. And video.